To this new tutorial where I'm going to now show you how to play around with keyframes, use a pen tool, add audio, titles, and export our coffee advert video. So by the end of our last tutorial, we were basically we'd constructed our advert using the video clips and in and out points to drag and drop them into the timeline. We added a little cross dissolve at the end of our penultimate and final shot. And now I'm going to start looking at how we can play around with keyframes to add a little bit more dynamism to our shots and to our edits. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just create a little bit of motion in one of the shots, because if you notice carefully, a lot of the shots have got movement apart from this one. So what I'm going to do for this particular shot is I'm going to slowly zoom out. This is called a Ken Burns effect, and it's just to add a little bit of dynamism. It's almost like I'm creating camera movement in the edit. So I've double clicked the actual video clip to load up the source. I'm going to go on effect controls, and on the right hand side here, effects control, this is the point of the source clip and it's connected to the timeline. So we can see here, that's the end. This is the final frame of the clip. And this is the first frame. So because scales, because I've used a 1080p timeline and it says 2160p video, it means I've actually got a lot of room to be able to zoom out and scale out on the video clip. So what I'm going to do is on scale, is if I select this button here, this will create a keyframe. So it's going to create an animation. So if I select it there, that's my starting point where I want the animation to appear. And if I now move it to the end of the clip, I'm just going to manually move across by pressing right. This is the end frame. I'm now going to change the scale and I'm going to zoom out a little bit further. So what that has done is it's created and used keyframes to basically from the first keyframe, scale is 89, and by the time the clip reaches the second keyframe, it is scaled down to 69.2, and it's created some movement within the edit. So if I play it back now, I've got a little bit more movement. So that's one way we can use keyframes to create motion, to create camera movement within the edit. Now what I'm now going to do is I'm going to use keyframes to create, to make this clip blur out, so then I can add my logo and it can be my final title card of my advert. So what I'm going to do is, this is the full clip here. Where do I want it to start blurring out? About here perhaps. So I am now going to double click. I'm going to go to effect controls and I'm going to leave my marker here for the time being. I'm going to go to effects and I'm going to click X to delete cross dissolve, and I'm going to click blur. I'm going to go down to fast blur and I'm going to drag that. You can either drag it onto the clip or I can drag it into this effects panel here for the original clip. What I want to do is select a toggle animation button again. That will create a keyframe. Now, just like what we did with the scale, find the last clip. I'm going to change blurriness to 55. So as we now watch the clip back through the timeline, good. Now to make that last clip last a little bit longer, I'm going to make sure I can see my last frame, and I'm going to select this little button here, which is export frame, final shot, I'm going to call it, and I'm going to click import into project. I'm going to change that to a PNG. I'm going to click OK. Now I've got a final shot PNG. That to me can just make it last a little bit longer if I need to. I can reduce it down later. So now my clip is starting to take shape even more. So I like the fact that we've got this starts to go blurry. that gives me an opportunity to include and introduce my assets, such as my coffee shop logo, which is a PNG. So I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to drag that in around about here, because that's where the blur starts. Obviously, I don't just want that to appear really aggressively like that. I want it to fade in quite naturally. So I'm going to zoom into my timeline. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to manually stretch out the size of my video track. So V1, I'm going to drag up a little bit from the top. V2, I'm going to drag in a little bit from the top. And I'm going to right click, and I'm going to show clip keyframes. I'm going to click on opacity. And this is how I can manually add fades and get things to fade in more naturally. So I'm going to use the pen tool to achieve this. So I'm going to click P. I'm going to select a pen. I'm going to select the opacity line here, and I'm going to select it around here, and I'm going to just drag that down. And what that means is it's going to be 0 opacity. In other words, it'll be invisible, and then it'll slowly become 100% visible in that time frame. So as we can now see, it's faded in. I'm going to go back to the selection tool. I'm going to double click that, and I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. And I'm going to move it up on the screen slightly, so I can fit a tagline underneath. So it says the timings. Now let's watch that through. I'm happy with that. It's probably still going to need prolonging a little bit more. I'm going to prolong both of these. So that's how we've added our asset. We will want that to fade out again, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the text first so they can all fade out at the same time. Okay, so I'm now going to go to graphics and titles. I'm going to click new layer text. This is selected and created a new text layer, and it's gone onto video track 3 this time. So I just want to talk about video tracks here. The higher the video track goes, basically prioritizes the highest video track over the one below it. To exemplify that a little bit further, what I'm going to do is if I randomly stuck a clip over the top of this, because that's on video track 2, it will replace it. So it becomes a cutaway. So that's how you can use cutaways. Rather than just doing individual cuts of the same track, you can just add another clip over the top. And that can be deleted afterwards, or it can be moved at any other point. So now we've got our track, we've got a text box appearing. So now let's move this. So if I select this text box, I'm going to move that. What I'm going to do actually is I'm going to click on Window, and I'm going to go on Workspaces, and I'm going to go Effects. And Essential Graphics, and that's going to give me more of an insight into what I can do with my text. My cheesy tagline for my products is for you. I'm going to center align the text within the box. If we go to align and transform here, I can select align center horizontally my text box. If you want a text directly in the center of the screen, you go to align center horizontally and then align center vertically, and it will go in the middle. Obviously on this occasion we don't want that because we've got our coffee logo there. Just like you would in Design or Photoshop, you double click on the text, and then you can change the font to whatever you want. I'm going to go to Mixter, which is one I've been using quite a lot recently. I go bold, and that's that. Obviously in the background, it's very difficult to see this at the moment because of the white tablecloth. So if I go down here, I can select a shadow, change the color to a slightly darker version of black, and it just does makes it pop out a little bit better. It adds a shadow to the bottom of the text. So with that being said, primer coffee. I then want my is for you line to come in. what I want now is for you to fade out. So use the pen tool again, but this time we're doing the opposite points. I'm going to do the same with the final shot. So then as these fade out, we're just going to be left with a Primer Coffee logo. And then the video will end. So now the video is starting to take shape again, even more. So we've managed to add a little bit of camera movement within the edit. We've managed to keyframe a fast blur onto a final shot. We've exported a still image and used that within the edit. We've now used a pen tool to make things, to keyframe opacity levels of certain assets. We've added text. So the last thing we really need to do for the video is add our audio.
Okay, so I'm going to go over to my window, select Workspace, Editing. This is just a preference for me. This is the workspace that I like to work in. To add my audio, I'm going to go to my audio bin that I created at the start of my tutorial. I'm going to click on my musical track, which is from YouTube Music Library. I'm just going to drag this onto my audio track 2 on this occasion. To do that, though, to drag any audio from your source frame, you need to click on the little sound wave and drag it from there and drop it in. I'm now going to use the the razor tool to cut it and delete the second half. Now this is the music. Ever so slightly cheesy. It doesn't necessarily fit the advert per se, thematically, but it'll do. These are the volume bars. What we always want to do is have our volume peaking at about -6 here. You see how it's starting to go orange? If it gets too loud, it will peak and go red, as we have just seen. That means that the sound will distort. So if you've got a really loud volume, we can sometimes afford to allow it to get to about -3. So I'm going to have to lower the volume of this track first. The way to do that is just with your audio track, is to make sure, if you haven't already done so, that you widen the size of the track. Now on this white line, which for our video we've set it as opacity levels to enable us to fade, this is just volume. So if I click on it and drag it and pull it down to maybe -4, that's -4 decibels, if the original is at 0, then we can listen again. Now this is better, it's less aggressive, but the most important bit is this area where it gets really loud. Now let's hear it now. It's getting there. I'm thinking maybe to do it at -5 should be sufficient. So if I basically make sure I've selected this track and go over to Audio Mixer Clip for sequence 1, if I now change this to -5 at the bottom, then it will drag it down. I can manually do this as well, but it's sometimes easy just to type in -5. Hopefully now, that's better. Now I'm going to add in my voiceover. I'm going to double click. Let's listen to this.
Primer Coffee is for you. Primer Coffee is for you.
Creepy as hell. Hate hearing my voice, it's bloody awful. But I'm actually going to use the second Primer Coffee. So I'm going to in and out that, and I'm going to drag that in. I want to make sure it's actually in line with where we actually see the Primer Coffee logo appear on screen as it starts to appear, so probably about there. I'm going to drag and drop that into Audio 3 this time, so I'm just constantly layering things up. And then my next one, I need to, when the It's For You tagline starts to appear, so if I then do it that, I'm going to find my second It's For You. I thought that was the least creepy of the two. So in and out, again, click, drag and drop in line with it. Now let's just mute the sound and just see if that sounds all right in terms of how it syncs up with the title and the text of the tagline.
Primer Coffee is for you.
Yeah, that seems to line up quite nicely and syncs quite nicely. Now we see it was
Primer Coffee is for you.
Ever so slightly quieter. What I am going to do though is I'm going to quickly go over to Window and I'm going to go to Workspace and Audio. Now there are some essential sound presets that we can use which are quite helpful, especially for stuff like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select both of my voiceover clips, and I'm going to click on the dialogue option, and then on preset, I'm just going to use the podcast voice preset. What it does is it just uses some, it just enhances the speech a little bit, just makes it a little bit clearer, and raises the volume automatically.
Primer coffee is for you.
So I'm now a bit happier with that. I'm going to raise the clip volume according to this preset a little bit more as well, so it's we get in there a little bit.
Primer coffee is for you.
Maybe a little bit more.
Primer coffee is for you.
Now I'm happy with that as I've got that. What I do now need to do though is I need to make sure that we can hear my voiceover over the music.
Primer coffee is for you.
Which I can confirm we cannot hear. So what I do need to do is I need to use some keyframes to make that audio dip. Now I can try to use these essential sound effects and actually click on my audio and select music. Then I can click on ducking and put generate keyframes, and it should actually use AI to find where the dialogue is, and because it's ducking against dialogue. Let's see what it does. It's added some automatically there, which is quite clever. Let's see if it does it effectively enough though.
Primer coffee is for you.
Who says AI isn't a good thing? Now that worked really well for me. I would go as far as saying as I don't need to do anything else, to be honest. But for future reference, if you don't want to use this piece of AI tech, then let's just undo this a couple of times. I'm going to click Command Z. And what you can do is you can manually do these. So you can use the pen tool and you can click, 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 and then selection tool and manually drag down.
Primer coffee is for you.
That's another way of doing it. Another way of doing it would be to select the audio and go into your effects control and do keyframes in there as well, like you could with when we did the motion and scaling keyframes. Very similar process. But in all honesty, I do feel like I did the better job there. So I'm just going to go back to this. I'm going to select that again. I'm going to select generate keyframes. And there we go.
Primer coffee is for you.
The last thing I want to do now, as we're nearing the end of the advert, is I'm going to slowly fade out my my music tracks. So I'm going to use my pen tool again, just like you would with video tracks. Kind of ends weirdly. I'm going to get rid of that last bit at the end. So I'm going to zoom in on my track and see a peak here. I'm going to get rid of this first and foremost. I'm going to stop it there. And now I'm just going to simply use the pen tool, one click, two click, and then pull it all the way down to the bottom. Maybe a bit aggressive, so I could move this across. Or in fact, we could do it further away this way. That works. Okay, so in short, that's basically our advert done now. So let's watch it through. Now in these two basic editing tutorials, I've shown you how to locate things in your workspace, import footage, use a drag and drop editing technique within and out points, use keyframes to change motion, scale, use the same keyframes for fade in and fades out and other transitions. I've also used it to help us import assets and start to manipulate them somewhat, and then use and add our audio tracks to include music and voiceovers. So in the next tutorial, I'll show you how to export the video, and look out for future tutorials where I'll focus on more creative transitions and things like color grading. So thanks for watching.